welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited that you are here and I'm so excited for today's video. It is part 2 of the Little Women reread. If you have not seen part 1, be sure to check it out. It's a very fun vlog, so I hope you check it out if you haven't seen it yet. So today we are going to be reading part 2 of Little Women. So I want to give you a little background on part 2. I was talking too fast, just need to take a deep breath. Okay, so Little Women part 1 was published in 1868 and Little Women part 2 was published in 1869. That's right. Yeah, I don't know, I just questioned myself, but that's correct. So actually originally it was published as 2 books. It's technically a 4-book series, but most people see it as 3 books. So that's including Little Men and Jo's Boys, which are follow-up books. But this book, as we sell it in the US, Little Women, is actually the first 2 books, which is Little Women and Good Wives. The publisher named it Good Wives. Originally it was called Little Women, the second part. So now in the US we package them together. A lot of other countries do too, but it's easier to find them separate in like the UK. So I have already started Little Women part 2. I haven't filmed much because I was busy and didn't really feel like pulling out my camera. But now I'm back into filming. So I am, let's see how far I am in part 1. Part 2. I finished part 1, obviously. Where is it? So part 2, I am a good chunk in. I'm pretty far into part 2 already, but nothing was very significant happened. I feel personally like part 2 is not as plot driven. There's a lot more anecdotes. We switch between being with each sister more. They're more separated now. Meg is married, Amy's in Europe, Jo is going to be heading off to New York. So there's a lot more going on separately as opposed to together like in the first part. So yes, I don't feel like anything crazy, shocking, or different to me has happened so far. So yeah, I am enjoying it. I would like to finish it pretty soon. We'll see how that goes. I also feel like part 2 reads slower just because there's more jumping around. And also I feel like people are less familiar with part 2 than they are with part 1. And I think that's partly because the film adaptations focus a lot on the stuff that happens in part 1. Part 2, there are so many very like diverse anecdotes and different things that happen, but most filmmakers for some reason skip them, even though I think they would translate well to film as well. I don't really know what the logic behind that is, but yes. So now I'm just gonna spend some time reading Little Women part 2, or Good Wives. It's a few hours later and I wanted to do a little book update. So I read quite a bit of this after I last talked to you earlier today. And I read a chapter and then I decided, put the book down, I needed to think. That chapter is one of the most iconic Little Women chapters. It's the classic, I've loved you ever since I've known you scene. And that chapter is actually technically called Heartache. Just in case you're wondering, I'm trying to find the title, 35, Heartache. So let's talk about the Jo and Laurie debate. So if you aren't familiar, which I don't know why you'd be watching this and not be familiar, most people who read Little Women, who watch film adaptations of it, ship Jo and Laurie. They're best friends and Laurie falls in love with her. But she turns him down famously. And for generations, and I mean generations, people have been angry about this. People argue about it. And there's also a lot of explanations on the internet that people have made about why they should have ended up together, why they shouldn't have. I did a review of Jo and Laurie, which is a retelling that has them end up together, and there are other things like that. I've gone back and forth from both sides of the conversation, and for the past few years, I've really felt firmly that they don't belong together, and that Jo belongs with Professor Bear, which is something else people argue with. Some people argue she was right to turn out Laurie, but she shouldn't have married Professor Bear. But as I'm reading this, as I'm going through it again, as I'm re-examining the story, it makes so much sense what happens. And I think I'm going to bring a new perspective to the table to talk about why I think they don't belong together and why Professor Bear is a better fit for Joe. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of Joe and Laurie's relationship. Obviously, they're best friends, and Joe views him as a brother. So it isn't wrong to believe that because she views him as a brother, she feels morally wrong with wanting to marry him. It just doesn't make sense in her head. It doesn't compute in her head. Also, just like she's known someone so long, it's not the same for her. She expects something different. And then, yeah, again, there's like the whole argument, like they would fight, their personalities aren't compatible. And I don't necessarily believe that's true. I believe that there is a time and place where people can be made for each other, but they're not meant to be together. And I think that's what we see with Joe and Laurie. I think they're made for each other, 100%. They are yin and yang. They are each other's better half, but they're not meant to be married. And I think that's totally possible and plausible, that people can be perfect for each other, but not in a romantic way. Your mother might be your other half, but you're not married to your mother. Your best friend might be your person, might be that person who understands you, who knows you best, who's made for you, but not in a romantic way. And I think there's a difference between the two, and I think that's what Joe and Laurie experience. So the next thing this is what really stood out to me differently about today when I was reading this. The difference and the reason, I think the largest reason why Joe picks Professor Bear over Laurie is the way she is treated. As a girl, we have conversations about how you're treated, how a guy treats you, and that's super, super, super important. And for some reason, as readers, we totally overlook how Laurie treats Joe. He's not rude, he's not abusive, he doesn't hurt her, he doesn't say mean things to her. But there's a very interesting way that he reacts to things. If you read his speech, which I'm going to read a part of his iconic speech to you, he says something that I think really reveals the nature of his love and why Joe feels like she can't love him. Let's see. I worked hard to please you, and I gave up billiards and everything you didn't like, and waited and never complained, for I hope you love me, though I'm not half good enough. And then he also says something about like growing his hair, and he stopped smoking, all for her. And I think that's the key why Joe never loved him. I think she has a great capacity to love, as Laurie himself says, and I think she's a loving person. But there's this way that Laurie treated her. He did things that he thought were for her. He gave up billiards, gambling, he gave up smoking, he grew his hair out, he stopped hanging out with certain people, he stopped chasing all these girls because she told him to. And he thought he was doing that for her, but she had told him to do those things, asked him to do those things for himself. She honestly loved him more than he ever loved her. She was going out of her way. She wanted her boy to be strong. She wanted him to be a good person for whoever he was going to be with, even though she knew it wasn't going to be her. She loved him so well, and he took these things that she wanted her to do and did them because he thought it would make her love him, when really she was doing those things, saying those things, asking those things of him out of love for him. It wasn't that he wasn't doing anything for her. He was only doing things for himself to better himself. And that's a good thing in a relationship. You should try to be the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. But he thought he was doing things for her. He thought he was loving her. He was being silent. He wasn't doing things out of love for her, even though he thought he was. And that's the disconnect that I see with Joe and Laurie, is that he's doing things that she wants him to do because she loves him, not because she wants him to love her. And also in the second half of Little Women, I feel like we see this draw, this like pulling apart of two magnets, that they're made for each other. They're meant to be connected. But Lori is the one running away. Jo realizes that something's up, so she goes to New York. And Lori doesn't make an effort to write her a letter or visit her or do anything. If he genuinely loved her, if it was more than infatuation, I think he would visit her. I think he would write her a letter. If you really care about somebody, you're going to do those things. You're going to show them love. You're not just going to stop gambling, because she's not in the gambling places, the casinos with you. She doesn't know the sacrifices you're making, and you're not telling her the sacrifices you're making. So how in the world could she know? If he loved her, he would do things for her, not because she said so. I think that leads me to the difference with Professor Bear. Professor Bear does things for Jo. He sees her for who she is. He critiques her work. That's a gift. I don't know if you realize this, but honest feedback on writing is a gift. He gives her this gift of these volumes of Shakespeare, and it says that they were well loved and they were part of his library, and he gave them to her. He wasn't like Lori, buying huge bouquets of flowers or bribing people with jewelry and wine and things like that. He saw somebody who loved a story, who loved this Shakespeare, who wanted a library of her own, and he thought, I have nothing to give, but I could give her this. He gives without expecting anything. He gives instead of trying to fix himself or change himself out of so-called love. He just loves. And I think that's the difference with him and Jo than Lori and Jo. Professor Bear just shows love. He emulates love to everyone who's around him. And Jo was raised in this very loving environment. She was raised by parents who went out of their way to help people in need. And that's what Professor Bear does. He's not rich by any means. He struggles, but yet he does whatever he can to bring joy into other people's lives. And that's something that Jo was raised to know and to do. Lori is not raised to do that. So I just feel like the things that Professor Bear does are so much more intentional and out of love. And obviously there's the whole age gap thing that people get into, but he truly loves her and he shows her love in a way that works for her. Lori shows her love by fixing himself, which she wants, but that can't change how she loves him. That's not going to change how she loves him. Professor Bear gives out of his menial amounts of things. He gives without asking anything in return, without expecting anything in return. And Jo respects and admires that. She is a woman who respects somebody who has independence. Lori relies on his family's fortune. Lori relies on other people's approval. Professor Bear does not. He does not let the fact he has an accent prohibit him from teaching. He does not let anything really at all prohibit him from doing what he wants. And he also has restraint, and he has faith, and he has character, and those things mean so much to Jo. She loves Lori, yes, but he's her little brother. He's the one that she wants to get on the straight and narrow so he can find that perfect woman and make a life. She has not pruned him for herself, and I think that's really significant. So those are just some thoughts on that whole conversation. Obviously, there are so many sides to the conversation. That's just a piece that I'm picking up on this read through, and I just felt like it was really interesting just seeing that juxtaposition between how these two men are treating her and how she's reacting to that. And I think it's also something that, as just like a girl, you should look for. See how somebody loves you. Are they loving you because without expecting anything, or are they trying to get something out of you? And I think Jo realizes this, and I think that's the difference in the relationships. I also feel like as you get older, different books mean different things, and I haven't really read through the book in about 2 years. So with my new life experiences, I read through this through the lens of my friendships, my relationships, things that I've been through, and I keep noticing those things, and I keep noticing how when you see relationships that work, these people are giving, expecting nothing back. That's what makes a strong friendship, parent to child relationship, romantic relationship, is giving without expecting anything back. And that's what Professor Bear does to Joe. And she just brings her joy. She just brings her personality. And that's enough for him. So, yeah, there we go. Those are some thoughts. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on the Joe and Laurie situation. I have my opinion, but I love hearing everyone else's opinions. I like to hear your logic, and I like to explore it. I love it. So yeah, just let me know. We can have conversations about it in the comments, because I think it's super interesting. And I do think it's an important topic, because I think it reflects like who we are as people. And I think what we read becomes a part of us, and it becomes a part of how we love and how we run our own relationships. So I think it's important to consider why we think something works or doesn't work, because I think it's important to understand yourself. So yeah, I've done a really bad job with this specific vlog, with filming myself reading and filming my reading updates. I kept just putting it off. I kept being like, well, my hair doesn't look good today, or well, I forgot to put blush on. So I made a lot of excuses, and I finished Little Women. Not only Little Women Part 2, but all of this lovely, lovely book. So don't worry though, we have a few more things I want to do before I close out this vlog, including my reading journal spread for the book. So we have some more stuff happening, but I thought I would just give you some final thoughts on the actual reading process of this book. I feel like Part 2 flew by, and which is weird because I remember reading it younger and it always dragged on. I always felt like there are some chapters in Part 2 that feel kind of silly, like Daisy and Demi chapters. But I don't know, this time it didn't drag on. It flew by. And I just found so much joy in that second part. I talked about Joe and Laurie thing quite in depth, so we're not gonna get into that really. I don't think we need to talk more about that. I've talked lengths about that. But I really I feel in this book, I noticed so much more of Joe and Professor Bear and how well they work together and how perfect they are for each other. And yeah, this reading, I don't know what it is, that it just made so much more sense to me. And yeah, it just, every time I read it, it makes more sense. So there was that. I did cry when Beth died. I always cry when Beth dies when I read the book. It's just, I don't know what it is to me. It's so sad, not just because like this character passes, but like in a way it's saying like the things that are good and pure and beautiful and just so innocent can't survive in this dark, painful world, and like that's why we need salvation. And that's kind of like the allegory I've taken out of Beth, is like Louisa even says it, that like how the best things, the best of us go before, and it's almost like this world can't hold that. I don't know. In the beginning of the part 1 vlog, I said that I think I'm most like Meg and my favorite character is Joe. And I said that it might change, and it has changed. I am a lot like Joe. Everything that comes from this girl's mouth, every conversation with Marmee, everything, it just hit me so much this time. I just kept thinking, that's me. And the way she reacts to things, that's me. And even though to a lot of people I'm very girly and I'm not like brash and loud, Joe's internal life, her inner life, is very much like my inner life. Even things that she says like, oh, I don't think I'll ever get married. I literally said that the other day. It's like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever get married, without even really thinking about Little Woman. Just like the things she does, the things she says, the way she reacts to things, how she's ambitious, but she like gathers her ambition together and she does things for the people she loves. I don't know, just her motivations, everything. It's just, I feel like I'm not describing this well and how it's neat because I think it's very deeply personal. But yeah, I think a lot of people say they're like Joe, and so you could take that with a grain of salt, but I think the people who know me well know, yeah, she's so much like Joe. Just, yeah, everything about her, everything about how she even like treats girls her age, how she says things without always realizing the consequences. That's a lot like me. So yes, I just reminded how much I just genuinely adore this book. If you have not read it, I don't care if you're old, I don't care if you're 8 years old, I don't care if you're male or female, I don't care. I want you to read this book. I think it will have a profound impact on you, even if it's not just like, oh my gosh, that's me. I think it'll help you better understand the women in your life. So with that being said, I wanted to talk about something else Little Women related. And I want to talk about this in the first video, but I forgot. And that is music that has to do with Little Women. I love music. And there is a lot of Little Women music and Little Women inspired music. So I thought it'd be really fun to share some of my favorites with you. Now, this is not like songs that people associate with Little Women, like I think Champagne Problems by Taylor Swift. There's like a Gracie Abrams one I heard in a podcast. It's not like those kind of songs that they like put on a scene as like an edit. These are music that is like in the films or the musicals, or that directly mentions Little Women. So the best place to start is the 1994 soundtrack by Thomas Newman. This soundtrack, if you are watching this when I upload it in December, this is like the soundtrack of like Christmas. I can just imagine you putting this on Christmas Eve, Christmas morning, and it just kind of filling your home. It is so inherently cozy, and I don't know if that's just because I associate it with the film, but the way it sounds, it's like cozy 90s. I don't know, it's so perfect, and I love it so much. I'm just like picturing it in my brain right now, and it's just making me feel good. And then the next one, which is also obvious, is the Little Women 2019 soundtrack, which is by, I don't know how to say his name, Alexandre Desplat, I believe. And this one is also amazing. It was my top listened to album of 2023, in case you were wondering about that. And this is like a soundtrack for like my vigorous writing and just the soundtrack of my life, honestly. I have it as my alarm in the morning. I have it in like every playlist. I love it so much. And those are kind of obvious, but I wanted to mention a song. So this song isn't specifically about Little Women, but it does reference Little Women. And kind of recently, I've seen people and heard people saying things that the Joe and Laurie scene is like their Roman Empire. If you don't know what Roman Empire is, I'm not going to explain it to you. You can just Google it. But there's a song called Roman Empire by Ava Liv Mabry. And one of the lines is, she's talking about her Roman Empire, the things she thinks about all the time. And she mentions, and that one scene from Little Women. And after that, I was like, this song is for me. And it's a great song, so I highly recommend that. And now we get to the piece de resistance, my favorite, and that is musicals. I'm like a wannabe theater kid. I'm not a theater kid, but I always like love musicals and love going to see them and listen to them. And there are Little Women musicals, even though they are not being adapted into films, even though they're not currently on Broadway. These musicals are incredible, and I think if you're a Little Women fan, you will love and appreciate them as much as I love and appreciate them. So we have to start with the 2005 Little Women. This starred Sutton Foster, and it was on Broadway for about a year and a half, I believe, and it went on tour. And now it's kind of a favorite of high schools. It's not much widestream, but there is talk of it returning to Broadway. They went on a US tour this year, I believe. And so this musical, it veers a little bit from the OG book, but it does stay pretty true. It's so good. It's like a classic musical, very dramatic. The songs, you can picture everything so well, and I love it to bits. It's so good. It's so like over dramatic. Like, it's very Joe. There are songs that are like her reading her stories out and she's acting them out, and she has all the cast who plays her sisters and Lori and John. They are like the characters in her story, and I think that's really fun. And then there's another one, and there's Joe, the Little Women musical. This musical is something I'm so incredibly excited about. They have released only 3 songs, I believe, at the moment, at the time I'm filming this. And it is a project that's been in the works for multiple years. And they are, in January, going to be recording the full, like, cast soundtrack at Abbey Road Studios in London. And they're going to be doing, like, a full orchestral performance of the songs in the West End. It's like a one-night thing, and I'm not going. But if you are somebody associated with Joe the Little Women musical, I would love tickets. I would love to go to this event. So the rumors now are that they're going to be opening on the West End before they come to Broadway, which is very sad for me because I don't live in London, though I wish I did. So hopefully they'll come to Broadway soon, but until then we obviously have this amazing music. And again, if you're somebody associated with Joe the Little Women musical, I would love to come to an event. I would love to come to a screen, like a performance. I would love to be there at opening night in the West End on Broadway. I would love free tickets. I will endorse you. I will do interviews. I will make blog posts and videos. I could host a panel, whatever. I'm here. I'm available. Let me know if you need somebody to do that, because I would love. Also, if you need someone to play a role, I'm free. Yeah. So yeah, those are my. That got a little intense. Sorry about that. Those are my music recommendations that are kind of associated with Little Women. If you guys know of any other things, let me know. If you have songs, like I said, that like remind you of Little Women, are associated with it, are used in edits, let me know those too, because I might be interested in them. So yes, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Yeah. Also, if your high school does Little Women the musical, let me know, because I'll come.